Okay guys, today we are going to be talking about what I consider the #1 most overlooked, underrated bass fishing structure that there are in any lake across the country that has this structure, and that is fishing bluffs. Guys, bluffs are an incredible structure to catch bass on 12 months out of the year. There's a lot of complexities to there's a lot of variables to it. There's a lot of considerations to take into effect. Today I want to go through each one of those, and I want to give you guys a really full tutorial on how to fish bluffs effectively, talk a little bit about the seasonal patterns around bluffs, and it's definitely going to add up to some good fish for you guys, because man, there's lots of fish use bluffs and big fish use bluffs, so we're going to get into that in today's video. Also guys, before we get started, a quick reminder that Tackle Warehouse has got that 12 days of Christmas sale going on. Man, if you want to get some good deals on tackle, Christmas presents for your friends or whatever, I'll have my Tackle Warehouse link in the description of this video. If you guys use that link, it's a good way to support intuitive angling here. Appreciate that. And as well, guys, we do have my winter Fish the Moment lake map breakdowns that I built for Fish the Moment up on the site there. If you guys are interested in getting one of the lake map breakdowns, links in the description. I really appreciate that. Okay, a lot of you guys that have been with the channel, you hear me refer to this quite a bit as bluffs, because here in the Ozarks of Missouri, we have a lot of bluffs to fish. And if you have a man-made lake, any man-made lake in the country has bluffs on it. You know, some of them have more than others. Some of them have a different variation of bluffs, because a bluff is something that it can be, but it doesn't have to be like a vertical wall. A lot of people think bluffs are just vertical rock walls, and while they can be, that is not the true classification of a bluff, because a bluff bank is basically a very steep bank that is located right next to a river channel river channel swing or a creek channel swing. Although some bluffs can be quite a ways away from the channel, talk a little bit about that here in a little bit. Those tend not to be as productive, but about every man lake in the country has got bluffs in it, in the creek arms and in the main lake, and sometimes in the coves here. And one of the things about bluffs is there's a lot of different techniques that work on bluffs, and that's what I sort of want to go over in today's video, is the different techniques in relationship to the time of the year that you're fishing there, because that is the whole key on fishing a bluff. If you're going to consistently catch bass on bluffs, you've got to use the right technique based upon the conditions surrounding the bluff and the lake you're fishing. So let's start out. Let's sort of go through the winter time. We'll go through winter, spring, summer, fall, sort of give you guys some tips and advice on how I like to fish bluffs. Okay, in the winter time, talking about anywhere between, like, say December to late February, bluffs are really good to fish, because bass like to hang close to vertical structures in the wintertime. They prefer vertical structures over horizontal structures, and therefore that's why they like bluffs. And another reason that bluffs are always productive is that they offer sort of like a highway to bass. Bass travel up and down bluffs a lot on their way to and from different parts of the lake. But in the wintertime, bluffs are really good, you know, most any lake that you have across the country. So anytime that you're talking about a bluff, now we're going to talk about this on every season of the year, your #1 consideration on the bluff is your water visibility. Your water visibility is going to dictate technique along with your water temperature on these bluffs in terms of how deep you fish and the primary, you know, techniques that's going to work the best. Sorry, got some allergies or sinus hacking right here. I've been coughing quite a bit. So anyway, let's talk a little about the wintertime. In the wintertime, you want to fish the bluffs, or the bluffs are going to be more productive if they have a little bit cleaner water. So if I'm fishing a bluff in the wintertime when that water temperature is in the 50s or 40s, I want to have at least 3 foot of visibility on the bluff that I'm fishing. 3 to 8 foot of visibility is ideal. Perfect bluff visibility for me in the wintertime is going to be about, you know, 3 to 5 foot clarity is going to be really, really good for it. Now, my favorite ways to fish them, there's 2 different ways that you can fish them in the wintertime. There are going to be some bass that are on the bottom of those bluffs, and there's going to be some bass that are suspended on the bluffs. And as far as the key structures within a bluff, it holds true 12 months out of the year. Your key structures are going to be any type of irregular feature, like a little outcropping on the bluff, a little bitty cut in the bluff, any type of rock transition, any type of change or variation within that bluff is going to be a key holding spot for fish. So that's a given. But in that wintertime, you got to make the determination if you want to fish on the bottom or suspended. And sometimes you can do both. So the first thing that I do in the bluff fishing in the wintertime is my number one technique is a jerkbait. And what I like to do with the jerkbait, I like to get my boat like in 10 to 20 foot of water, and I make a long parallel cast down the bluff. And depending upon if that water visibility is closer to 3 feet or 5 or 6 foot clarity, I'll just saturate that depth zone that I think those fish are in. So let's say, for example, if the water visibility is 4 or 5 foot, a lot of times those fish are going to be over 10 to 20 foot of water. So I'll cast that jerkbait parallel to the bluffs, and I try to target that 10 to 20 foot of water. If it's closer to 3 foot of visibility, I'll fish a little shallower. If it's cleaner, fish a little deeper. So that's going to be my number one thing with that. Then my second thing with that is I'm going to graph a little bit on the bluffs, and I'm going to look for shad. If I do see some shad schools or shad balls out away from the bluff suspended, I'll take a little swim bait, like a little 2.5 inch Kitech or that little Megabass Spark Shad, and I'll fish it in and around those shad balls, making long casts, not necessarily targeting the shad ball because I don't use forward-facing sonar, but I'm targeting the depth. So I'll make long casts down in the areas that I'm seeing these bait fish, count the swim bait down to where the bait balls are, and I usually can catch some fish like that. Alabama rig can work pretty much in the same situation as the as the jerkbait can. So sometimes, like on a windy, cloudy day in the wintertime, I'll use an Alabama rig over a jerkbait. Alabama rig's really good on bluffs. And then finally, finesse jig, like my little Blaukat, throwback compact finesse jig. Finesse jig on the bluffs are really good, and I'll fish them. I'll just cast them up to the bank there, and I'll work them down anywhere between, say, 10 to 30 foot deep, depending upon how clear the water is. Bass will get really deep on bluffs in the wintertime. Guys, you can catch bass on the bottom in bluffs, sometimes down 45 or 50 feet. So that's my three primary weapons, is a jerkbait, an A-rig, and a finesse jig. Okay, now in the springtime of the year, pre-spawn is a great time to fish bluffs. Probably one of the best times of the year to catch a big one on bluffs. Number one technique when I'm fishing a bluff during the pre-spawn, and the pre-spawn is usually when that water's in the 50s, is I'm slow rolling a big spinner bait, like a big 3/4 ounce or 1 ounce spinner bait. I'm just casting at a 45-degree angle, trying to slowly work it down the stair steps, work it down the drops. And guys, you can catch some toads on a big spinner bait during the pre-spawn on bluffs, especially if the bluff is close to a point. Those spinnerbait fish really like to be relate. They don't necessarily they're not on the point, because the point is actually not the best place to fish with that big spinnerbait. But like, let's say I'll start 100 yards on the bluff I'm leading up to a point that's like 100 yards in front of me, and I'll slow roll that spinnerbait, try to keep it close to the bottom. Really, really good way to catch them with that. And also another bait that works really good during the pre-spawn is a wiggle wart or rock crawler, especially if that water visibility is in that 3 to 5 foot range. Just paralleling that bluff bank with a wiggle wart or rock crawler, really good way to catch them. Now, another thing that a lot of people don't realize is when those fish are spawning, bass will spawn on those bluffs. I'm getting ready to do a video on a friend of mine that was a scuba diver that taught me a lot about fishing bluffs. And he said that if you have a lake that has a lot of spotted bass on it, spotted bass will spawn all over those bluffs. So a lot of people think that bluffs aren't good during the spawn, but they can be with spotted bass. And the best way to catch them that time of year is like on a Ned rig or shaky head, just working your way methodically down the bluff. During the post spawn, which is usually like into May, number one way that I like to fish a bluff is with a walking topwater, like a Zerspook or Megabass Diamante. Guys, this is a deadly way to catch fish. It's like after those fish get done spawning, a lot of them will move back out of those spawning coves, and they'll, get back on those bluffs. And a walking topwater is deadly, especially if you got some pretty clear water. It can be really, really good. And if you got a dirtier water situation, this is when the dirtier water starts to work on bluffs. So like in the wintertime, you need that clear water, but in the post-spawn, with the water warming up into the 70s, if you have a lake that has like 1 to 2 foot of visibility, bluffs are really good in the post spawn with like a big square bill crankbait, just knocking those rocks, fishing, less than 5 foot of water with that square bill. Okay, summertime is probably my least favorite time to fish bluffs. Once about June, July, August, early into September, I can catch fish on bluffs, but normally they're a lot smaller. So bluffs are not necessarily my favorite target during the summer months, but the time that I do fish bluffs in the summertime is at night. If you like to fish at night, bluffs are great to fish at night. And I think one of the reasons that the fish don't use them much during the daytime in the summer is I think a lot of those fish are suspended out off those bluffs above the thermocline or out off open water, and then they move up shallow on those bluffs at night, and then they move back out deeper. I'll give you a prime example. I remember about 15 years ago, I was drop shotting down at Table Rock Lake in some submerged timber out off a bluff bank. And I was probably, I don't know, 100 yards off the bank, vertical jigging this standing timber with a drop shot. And I caught 2 or 3 bass, and 2 of them had fresh crawdad pinchers sticking out of their throats. So I knew that those crawdads weren't out in 60 foot of water on those suspended over 30 foot of water in the treetops. Those bass had swum up to that bluff at night and got them a crawdad, then came back out and suspended during the daytime. So try fishing bluffs at night, especially with like a big plastic worm, like a 9 or 10 inch plastic worm is probably my favorite thing. Slow rolling the black spinnerbait can be good, but really good that time of year. And then finally, guys, fall. Fall is a great time to fish bluffs. Couple different things that I like in the fall time of the year is it'll work in any water visibility. I don't care if you got a foot of water visibility or super clear. Bluffs are great places to fish in the fall time of the year. A lot of it has to do with the wind. The wind dictates my technique in the fall more than any other time. If you don't have much wind, the number one technique is a finesse jig. Again, like my Blaukat, power finesse jig, casting it to that bluff bank, working it out anywhere between 5 to 30 foot of water, depending on how clear the water is. They love a finesse jig in the fall time of the year on bluffs. But that's not my favorite way to catch them. My favorite way to catch them is a wind-generated bite on bluffs. Number one way that I like to catch them, guys, is burning a spinnerbait on a bluff in the fall time of the year. If you can get a low light day, like it's cloudy with some wind, ripping a little spinnerbait like that Megabass SV3, just paralleling the bluffs, right on the bank with it, great way to catch some good fish, especially if you got a mixed species like largemouth, spotted bass, or smallmouth. Catch a lot of fish like that. And then if I have a dirtier water situation, say for example, that water visibility is under 2 foot, a small crankbait like that, either a small square bill or like that Megabass Super Z2, a little crankbait, fish shallow parallel to those bluffs is a really good way to catch them in the fall time of the year. So anyway, guys, that's just a brief summary. We could go on for another 5 hours about bluff fishing, but that gives you some good starting points. Don't pass them up. Bass love bluffs. They live on them all year long. Probably one of the best places to have a potential to catch a giant fish. The biggest bass I ever hooked in my life was on a bluff at Table Rock Lake in 1982. Giants live there because it's safe for them. So hope it helps you guys out. We'll talk later.